The Max King-Gus Nichols debate, 1973. Forward by Don K. Preston, read by David Clark. The story of this debate is a bit of a personal story to me. As a young man growing up in the Churches of Christ Fellowship, Gus Nichols was one of my heroes. He was heralded as a great Bible teacher, speaker and debater, a champion of the truth. I was privileged to hear him speak on several occasions and truly thought that he was a great thinker, an excellent logician. On one occasion, my father came back from attending the Freed Hardiman lectures held in Henderson, Tennessee. He related a story that I found both humorous and a bit disturbing at the time. In that story, I heard the name of Max King for the first time. My father recounted an exchange between Gus Nichols and King during the open forum. Someone from the audience asked Brother Nichols what he thought of Max King's view. He rather stridently condemned King and his followers as false teachers. King stood up and challenged the comments, asking if Nichols had ever read any of King's works. He hadn't. King responded that it is hardly appropriate to condemn a man before without knowing what he believes and why. Nichols simply scoffed at King's comments. When my father related to me what the controversy was about, I was somewhat intrigued, but put off by what had seemed, according to my father, who also admired Nichols, an unkind and unfair situation in the way King was treated. In my admiration for Nichols, I found it hard to believe that he was not being fair, but that was the report. That was pretty much the last I heard of King for a few years. I knew a debate between Nichols and King had taken place, but I heard some very disturbing things about it and never purchased a copy of the book. As the years passed and I had begun to study the scripture for myself, I knew that I was beginning to espouse views diametrically opposed to those taught by my heroes in the faith, men like Gus Nichols. In fact, I had begun to believe in some of the strange things that this guy, Max King, supposedly taught. I did not own a copy of his book. According to my father's recounting of the early exchange, as I began to share my findings with my preaching peers, I was repeatedly accused of being a Kingite, a follower of Max King. I had to ask what that meant. Since, as mentioned, I did not own a copy of King's book and had never heard him speak, the more I studied and the more I shared, the more I was rejected, even ostracized. I could see a train coming. Two things then happened. One of my other heroes of the faith, Jim McGuinness, had a debate with Max King. I had the utmost respect for McGuinness's knowledge and felt that if anyone could rescue me from the road I was on, it was McGuinness. I still did not fully understand everything King was saying, but I did know that he claimed that the second coming of Christ, the end of the age, and the resurrection occurred at the end of the Old Covenant age of Israel in 70 AD. I had begun to see the possibility, but I just did not want to go there. I badly wanted and expected McGuinness to so thoroughly expose King's error that I would be pulled back from the brink of apostasy. I had been warned repeatedly by several prominent brethren that if I continued in my path of study, that I was heralded for brotherhood rejection. So I purchased the McGuinness-King debate and read it over and over again. I was utterly, totally disappointed in McGuinness. What happened in that debate was that McGuinness, on several occasions, literally gave the farm away with his admissions. It was more than obvious that McGuinness had not done his homework, and his desperation grew as the debate proceeded. To McGuinness' credit, in a latter book, he apologized to King for his unchristian conduct and went so far as to say that few men alive understood Pauline theology as well as King. Realizing that McGuinness had so totally failed to rescue me, I frantically cast around to find some other resources to do the job. That is when the second thing happened. I found a copy of Nichols' King debate from many years earlier. I eagerly purchased that, hoping that Nichols would succeed where McGuinness had failed. Once again, I was totally disappointed. What I found, and what I think the discerning reader of this book will find, are several disturbing things about Nichols' approach to the debate. 1. He purposely and repeatedly misrepresented King's position, as King repeatedly pointed out. Yet even though he was corrected, Nichols just repeated the false claims. This is totally inappropriate. It is regrettable that misrepresentations continue to be the mainstay of the opponents of covenant eschatology. Nichols literally ignored many of King's arguments. Now, in fairness, in the time strictures of the debate, it is extremely difficult to address every point raised. However, when a person presents an argument repeatedly as critical to his position, it is incumbent on the other man to address the fundamental issue. Nichols refused to do this, repeated his straw man arguments. Nichols made several arguments that were nothing but poison in the well. Arguments. He gave no exegetical support to his claims, simply throwing out several claims about King's position. This is too common of a debate tactic, but of course it proves nothing. 4. Most of Nichols' arguments were purely presumptuous in nature and not based on textual exegesis or sound hermeneutic. He simply affirmed that time will end. He simply claimed the physical bodies must come out of the ground. Assertion is not proof. 5. As the debate progressed, Nichols grew increasingly angry and caustic in his language, while King remained in the very picture of Christian decorum. This was a very telling development. As I read the Nichols-King debate, I realised that just as McGuinness had failed to refute King, Nichols had done even worse of a job. Nichols and his camp knew this, and it is demonstrated by the fact that there was an original agreement for the follow-up debate to be held in Alabama. Nichols and his elders broke that agreement, violating their own word, and refused to have that second debate. As you read this debate, I believe you will see exactly what I did. You will see tradition come face to face with Scripture. You will see exegesis refuting mere assertions. You will see sound logic and proper hermeneutic at work, refuting sloppy proof texting. You will see the power of simplicity of truth presented by King in an humble yet convincing manner, while anger, frustration and bitterness was on the face of Nichols. I am happy to recommend this book to you for your own careful study. I believe you will find it to be eye-opening. Don K. Preston, DV, President of Preterist Research Institute, Ardmore, Oklahoma. www.eschatology.org. The Max King Gus Nichols debate 1973 is now available from amazon.co.uk and amazon.com, or directly from www.createspace.com/6706919. This book is recommended by David Clark, the president of Bearton Particular Baptist Pakistan, to Primitive Baptists in the Philippines and the USA, also Gospel Standard Baptists in the UK, and other Christians holding to historic and futuristic views of the second coming of Christ.